I've been out here working for a couple hours, so I'd take a quick break and do a video update. I think the last time I did this, I had some of the walls up maybe, but not much. Now I've got all the walls done in the garage area. Went pretty smooth, I thought. It took me about 2 weeks, picking away on the weekends and weekdays a little bit. Pretty much by myself. Had Aiden help a little bit. My granddad was here for one day, he helped me a little bit. But it's mostly a one-man job with an assistant, hand you something, hold something in place or whatever. But again, thought it went pretty smooth. I'm still happy I went with the plywood at this point. It would have been such a bigger job trying to do drywall in here. And I think it's gonna look just good enough for what I'm doing out here. Especially once I get it painted white. All these imperfections you won't see near as much. And I've tried taking some caulking and filling in some of the deeper pits. Gonna use it like Bondo. Squirt some in there and just scrape it over. Just kind of keeps the shadows from falling over it once I get paint on it and everything. So you don't notice them as much, but you're never gonna get it perfect with drywall, or excuse me, with plywood. So, you know, the seam around the top was something I was concerned with. I looked into getting 12-foot tall pieces, but couldn't find any, so I ended up having to cut that second seam. And I don't think you'll notice it too bad. I'm gonna try to put a little bit of caulking in some of the larger gaps and things. There's really not that big of gaps, maybe a few places off by an eighth or something. But it's kind of hard to say. You know, I get it painted, you may never even notice it. But just want to do it the best I can while I can, and then yeah, that's all I can do. So anyway, I'm planning on getting the whole inside done, then painting everything. I've debated trying to paint plywood, you know, whether it's the ceiling panels or the wall panels on the ground first. I don't think the walls don't make any sense for sure. The ceiling might have made sense, but then you're trying to paint them and juggle them, rinse out your roller. You can only paint so many at a time before there's space left in the garage. And then you still got to paint it again when you're done because you got screws everywhere. And so I just think I'm going to tough it out, paint it up on the scaffolding with a roller. May be able to do some of it from the ground with a long pole with a roller on it, but we'll just see how that goes. But anyway, I think it'll look completely different when it's painted, obviously. You know, it still looks a little bit rough being plywood, but once it's all white, I think it'll look good, especially when you just kind of stand back and walk in. You don't really focus on it. I think you're going to walk in here and think, it looks just like a good looking wall. You know, it's not like I don't think he's going to come in here and say, wow, what a mess this is. I think it's going to look just fine for what I'm trying to do in here. But I've started getting some quarter round in there on the corners. I'm just going to use caulking around the bottom seam here. Save probably $200 in trim for nothing, you know. It's not gonna look that much better, and it seals pretty good with that caulking. This will be gray on the bottom and then meet up in the corner there with white. Let's see. All these receptacles took some time. Try to get that exact, good enough to where receptacle box will catch on there and the cover plate will fit around it, but without showing a gap in there. It's harder than you think because you set the wall on there and you have to shift it around to get everything to align, and that twists where the hole's at a little bit. So it's kind of a little bit of guesswork, but most of them turned out pretty good. Get my door trim finished up there. A little bit of quarter round there. Picked up a bunch of R19 yesterday. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But started working on the ceiling in the past, when did I start this? What is today? Let's see, I think I started it last weekend, and I probably got about 7 hours in it at this point to get 5 panels in, maybe 8 hours. Kind of learning as I go what I'm doing, tricks, and little things, make things smoother. The first ones are harder too because I've got all those receptacle boxes to put in and cut and get it exactly in there, kind of like the wall, run wiring and whatnot. I think the next ones will go a little bit quicker. But what I ended up having to do is set this one first. This is the one everything else is based off of because it sets up against the wall. See over here, I've got this I-beam not I-beam, but a beam, I guess, plywood holds up that gable. You know, it doesn't line exactly with the wall, so I couldn't use it. Like I thought I was gonna start in this back corner, you know, get it up against the wall tight that way, up against that beam that way. And I realized that beam isn't really have anything to do with this wall. And if you get that first one off, everything else is kinked as it goes. You know, the ends aren't gonna line up. Like say that end right there wouldn't line up by the time I got way down here with the bottom of the truss, which it has to hit something to hook onto. So I thought through it, and again, I went off this one. So this is the main one everything's based off of, essentially. You can make a little bit of tweaks as you go, but if you imagine, if you tweak one of them just a little bit, you're gonna have a triangular gap right there, and then it just throws everything off from there. So I'm hoping that by setting it off that one, that's as good as it's going to get. It seems to have lined up pretty well with that truss, and again, there's a gap here. I'm going to have to put some trim or something to cover that up. And then when it came down to here, it fit pretty good. It's pretty square, so I think I'm all right so far. But what I end up doing is running 2x3 on the ends. That way there's plenty for it to catch on both sides. And then in the center, I've got a little 2x2 that way, and then another 2x3, and another 2x, it just kind of one after the other. Trying to be as lightweight as I can, and obviously it's cheaper. Like I could just put 2x4s everywhere, right? And have plenty to hook onto everywhere, but it's way more weight and cost, and it's just, it's actually kind of hard working upside down like that. You're picking things up, your back and arms get wore out, putting screws in and drills, and just, lighter wood to work with for this job is definitely going to be a positive thing. So I think that it's plenty strong enough using those 2x2s and 2x3s for what I'm trying to do. All it's really trying to hold up is that insulation and the wood itself, which is pretty lightweight. I got a stack of them over here, about 50 of them the other day. But I think they weigh 23 pounds, if I looked it up right, maybe 25, over 32 square feet. So it's less than a pound per square foot for just those. And then you got all the 2x3s, 2x2s, the insulation. I think I'm coming in under 2 pounds per square foot, which the ceiling is rated for 5. So I've got, plenty to spare. But if I would have wanted some other options like drywall or 1/2-inch plywood and 2x4s, I mean, it could easily get out of hand and be pretty heavy. And, it may hold just fine, but I'd rather have some room to spare on that, especially if I want to store some stuff up there. So building kind of a lightweight design that I still think is going to look pretty nice. Here in a second, I'll come up and show you what I'm doing with the insulation, but that's at least a third of the job is getting all that insulation up there. I've got, like I said, R19 over there, about 33 rolls yesterday. And I've got R13, which I've got 10 here or 8 over there, and I need to go get about 40 more, I think, to get me through the setup I'm doing, which again, I'm gonna go up on the scaffolding here in a second and show you what that looks like. All right, I'm up here above the panels I just showed you. Got the camera on 0.5 zoom because it doesn't work very good on one, but hopefully it turns out kind of clear. But anyway, kind of my method here is to put R19, it's called faced, it's got the paper on the one side, the face down, and then put a layer of that, the R19, and then take R13, rip the face off of it, because you can't get unfaced R13 very easily. At least I've asked look like Lowe's could order it for you, but anyway, it wasn't worth it. It's about the same price, but it's just a little extra step. You got to sit there and rip that paper off. But then I run it perpendicular as a second layer. So like this one only has R19 right now. This has R19 plus a second layer of R13 on top of it. So really you're supposed to have R30 around here for the ceiling, what the code is. Of course, I really don't need to follow the code for what I'm doing, but still that's recommended for this temperature zone. And obviously the more you do, the less your heating bill is, right? But there's a balance point there. You could put you could stack 30 or 3 layers of R30 in here, have R90, but yeah, it costs money. I think I'm going to have around $1,700 with this setup for this, just the ceiling and insulation. So, this is going to end up being R32. So say if you did R90, which again, that's kind of ridiculous. Nobody does that, but you'd be looking at what, almost $5,000. So, how many years of heating is that going to take to pay back? Because really, I'm only going to heat it to 45 or 50 in here most of the time, and then come outside and bump the heat up while you're working. And it just really doesn't get that cold around here, it seems like, most of the time. So, I just don't think the heater's going to be running that hard. So it would take a long time to pay off much more than this, I think. I'm not planning on cooling it, so then half the year you're not doing anything. Really, just a couple months of the year you're heating it a little bit is all we're doing. So really, I probably could have got away with just doing R19 without being too uneconomical. But I want to do this because if you just do this, you end up leaving gaps everywhere. You got your wood right here, like these cross braces, things like that. So it does put another seal on all that, and then kind of seals up the cracks this way. So I'm trying to put them opposite directions. Plus, obviously, another R13 value to it all. So I think it's a good setup. Give me R32, and hopefully that furnace won't have to run very much. And so anyway, that's what I'm doing, and just time consuming. You got to cut out 4-foot sections, come up here, set these in place, and do a cut out 4 the 13s, run them the other way, try to shove them back in there, up and down, you know. It's probably, for every sheet, it's 4 trips up and down to deal with that per panel, and I've got like 47 panels to do, so do some math, hundreds of trips up and down, setting this in there. Of course, you're all itchy, and it gets in your lungs. I've been trying to wear a mask, but not the funnest job ever, but not too difficult. It's going to be a lot worse if I don't hurry up, because in the middle of the summer, it's going to be way hot up here. But working in the mornings in the spring, it's not too bad, but I'm hoping to get the majority of this done before it gets too hot out. I guess one last thing on this, I did some research on this face stuff, because I wasn't sure what the normal thing is for an attic. It seems like most attics I've been in, you see the insulation like this, you don't see paper sticking up, right? Well, I think the common practice, from what I can gather, is to put face, like have face in the heated section. So basically the point of this stuff is to keep condensation off the wood behind it, which kind of hard for me to imagine getting much condensation on there with this much insulation anyway. It just doesn't seem like there'd be that much temperature differential to where water's like, you know, getting attracted to that wood. But anyway, I guess it's common practice to use this as a vapor barrier, and it kind of makes sense anyway. I mean, I could have just got R30 unfaced, which is pretty common, stuff it in there, but I guess I'm taking an extra step doing it this way and having that paper face in it, and because I really don't want to get mold or, yeah, this stuff rot or something over time. Like I said, I kind of doubt it would, but that's the recommended method. So that's what I've learned, just Googling and stuff. Plus, like I said, over the years being in attics, this is what I see. I never see the face of the paper sticking up. You know, some people talk about you're not supposed to put face in between. So like, that's why I'm ripping that paper off the R13. I could just set it right on here, right? Have a piece of paper here, piece of paper there, then pink, or I could flip it over. You could have paper on the top, paper on the bottom. They say that creates like a moisture pocket in there. So different theories on all that from what I've seen, but this is how I'm doing it. One face down, rip the face off the other, and perpendicular. And anyway, I think it's going to be plenty good for what I'm trying to do here. For the house, you may need to get a little bit more specific with how you do it. But another option too, I guess, is could have done blown in insulation. I really didn't get any prices on that. I just feel like this is probably my best method, because you really can't get around this attic very good when I'm done. I'm planning on putting like a row of wood down this way. That way I can at least get back to there. But then trying to get back into these spots, I don't know, you know, in terms of trying to get blown in insulation. Like say down there, you really don't want to get insulation up against that soffit, because that's how air flows up through there. So if I'm trying to blow insulation in there, what's keeping it from blowing on top of that soffit? You know, it just seems much more precise to get it, each piece set by hand like this. So then you got to rent a machine. And again, I didn't even compare the cost of the material. I figure it's probably roughly the same anyway. So anyway, that's probably about it on the walls and ceiling right now. So keep picking away at it. Get a little further, I'll do another update. One thing I didn't talk about much is this lift I bought. It's a cheapo Chinese junker. I think it was like $180 shipped from Amazon. And you get like $700-800 American units, but everything I read said that for a weekend warrior like me, this is probably my best bet. Really not that big of an advantage to the nicer ones. And I've only put up 5 panels so far, but so far it's working great. You just roll this, and it's got a little brake on it. The only thing is that you start rolling this, and as you can imagine, it starts building up on here, and at some point it falls off. And when it does that, it scares the heck out of you every time, because you know, you're 10 feet in the air with a piece of plywood, and it goes bang, drops an inch or two, and then it catches itself, you know. But so that's not the best, but kind of get used to it, I guess. But yeah, it's pretty nice and adjustable. You can do 12-foot long pieces if you wanted. This kind of rolls down, you make it easier to slide up on. I don't even fool with that right now, because those pieces are light enough I can just flop them up on there. But it rolls around real easy. It's got locks on it, which normally don't use. But so far, it's definitely worth it. I had considered not even buying it and just trying it where those panels are so light, just trying to shove it up on there with my shoulder. But I think it's gonna be definitely worth it. I haven't even tried doing it that way, but yeah, because what ends up happening is you gotta get everything exactly square, and that piece is so flimsy and flexible. And if you shove it up in the middle, it's not gonna meet on the end. So how are you gonna know when you're on the middle, or when you're squared up? So you need something that can hold on the ends too, good enough, where you can shove it up against the 2 boards and get it up there nice and tight, so you don't see gaps in between there. So especially working by myself, I just think it's definitely was the way to go. I'll probably use it and sell it for $100 or something when I'm done. So for $80 investment for this whole job, not even, it's kind of a no-brainer really. But yeah, anyway, that's about it on it. It's nothing fancy, but